Recording in progress.
All right, so welcome back to Think Differently. Today's topic is what to do when creating content feels hard. And I'm actually sharing this in a time where I have actually not posted content for almost a month. I've been sharing with my email list, but most of my content has not gone out past my email list to social media, and I'll share a little bit about why, but I actually wrote this put this down as today's topic because I'm in a time period or a season where I'm changing how I do my content. I'm changing back-end processes and systems. I'm changing sort of how I think it through. And as I've been putting together my new way, it just has been very clear that this is something that I talk to clients about all the time. There is no my way is your way, right? It's just your way. But this is a topic or a problem, so to speak, that my clients and I are tackling all the time. And I don't say that to mean it always is going to be a problem, and I don't say that to mean there isn't a good way to do it. But I do say that to say, hey, if something is feeling hard, right, especially if it didn't feel hard in a previous season, it's often a good opportunity to kind of look at why. And hopefully today I can maybe help you figure out why and figure out a couple of both strategic, practical, and mindset things that might help you shift out of it feeling so hard and back into, maybe it's never felt good to you, into a space where it's just not so hard. But I do think that when we change things up, or when things change in our lives, in our brains, in our businesses, in our health, in all kinds of things, one thing, it's the butterfly effect, right? Like when one thing changes, not to say everything has to be burnt down and started over, please don't hear that, but things have to change. And iteration and adjusting is just the name of the game. And so I just think it's really, really important that's why I'm actually talking about it today. So and how do I want to say this? If you've been around the block, or if you've been with me for any period of time, you know that I always speak the truth. And I try really hard. I don't actually know how well I do this, but my intention is always to share how you can have a positive mindset and how you can look at things from a helpful standpoint so that you're just not making yourself wrong. And I just believe that a lot of mindset stuff, we just hold ourselves back because we create stories that we can't, or it's supposed to be a certain way, or any bullshit that your brain is telling you, that lies that your brain is telling you. And I'm also not here to blow smoke up your ass. I'm not here to talk toxic positivity. Running a business can be hard. I think there are lots of ways where we make it harder on ourselves. But I also think that anything worth having has its challenges and its ups and downs. And I'm behind the scenes every day with my clients in all of that. And so I'm never one to say business is easy, everything is a fluffy unicorn, I'm here to try to strike the real deal between the optimist and the pessimist, or really the optimist and the realist, I think, is really the space that I sit in. And so I'm going to always approach it from that perspective. But I'm also sharing this today where I am not the model. And I think that's a weird thing to say as somebody who's presenting herself as an expert in her field right now in this example. But again, I actually, that is actually my expertise. My expertise is looking at the reality of this situation. And what's important to see is what's right for my business is not right for your business. What's right for your content strategy is not right for my content strategy. And so I'm actually modeling for you, however backwards and confusing it might sound. On the surface, it looks like I'm not putting content out on social media, and I'm not. And underneath that, what I'm doing is giving my business exactly what it needs in this season. And you'll probably see a post coming out in a day or two. It's not like I'm not posting on social media. It's just the thing that has been left off lately because I have other things that are more important. And so that's kind of my very odd preface of please do not look to me as a guru or as a model of how to run a business. You can look to me as a person who understands how to run her business and how to help you run yours. And that's really the space that I approach my coaching with. I almost said consulting. I haven't been a consultant in 8 years, almost 9. That's how I approach my coaching with my clients, former consultant. And that's how I approach my business, which is what do we need right now? What do I need? What does the business need? And then what do we need right now? And that answer is always going to be different over time. Okay. That's my little preface. Yeah, okay. And so let me just share one more thing about that, which is this is not a behind the scenes, like here's all the details of my business. If you're interested in that, I did a little behind the scenes at the end of the year last year, in December, where I did kind of like I think it was called because I had my second best financial year ever last year in business. And I talked about like really what were the changes, and some things were like, oh, I like took this one thing and I made this tiny tweak and it made all the difference in my brain. Or what are the strategic changes I made? Like I went through kind of behind the scenes of like what I did last year. So if you're interested in a behind the scenes, when you get this replay, you'll have access to that replay as well. So I'm not going to go behind the scenes in detail, but point being, I have some behind the scenes projects that I'm working on for the business that are taking and must take time and energy for me to do well. And then I have some personal life things that are taking a little bit of extra time that won't always be this way and haven't been this way. But right now I have a little bit of a season where I'm doing some personal life stuff. And so from a time perspective, the thing that has fallen off by design, by strategic decision, has been I have not been putting out as much content. And so again, and I want to also say at this point in my business, where my business is right now, I have a very healthy pipeline, and I don't want to create a story that we don't need content, but it's not the thing that's going to create my next sale. And I just want to be really clear about that. So I know my business, I know my strategy, and me deciding to pull back a little bit from a content standpoint is actually my strategy. And that if you were sitting across from me and I knew all the details of your business, I might exactly tell you to do the opposite thing. I might say, no, we actually need to get right back into more content, right? The right answer for you is different than the right answer for me. And that is also to say, it's not that I'm leaving it, right? It's not an all or nothing. It's just when you have priorities set in your business and you have a clear and solid strategy, when you have a time capacity issue, which is what I'm solving for right now, something has to give. And so I know my strategy, I know what works for my business and what doesn't, or I know what works for my business the most and what creates the easiest and fastest and most productive path to my next client. I also know my capacity, and so when I puzzle piece all of that together, at this point in this season in my business, certain things become a lower level priority, which means I get to them when I can. Not I get to them every single day. So my number one thing, I really am going to get to how do you make content easier, but this is actually part of the story that I want to share with you, which is the very, very, very first thing that I want you to have. And this is so simple and basic, and you might laugh at me, but you would be surprised at the number of times that people come to me and they're like, oh, I just don't have this. You need a strategy. You need a strategy for your business, and you need to know what that is, and you need to know how it works. And then you need a content strategy that aligns to your overall strategy in your business. And that content strategy then is, if you know what your strategy is, right, where are you pointing people? What are you trying to sell? Are you trying to sell your group program right now? Are you trying to sell a one-on-one offer right now? Are you trying to grow your business to start? Are you pivoting and you're trying to speak to your existing audience and also start speaking to a new audience? Are you what are you doing, and what does your business need to drive? What is your content driving people to? What's the purpose? And so if you don't have a purpose and you don't know why, and you don't have and I keep doing this because I think strategy is so high level umbrella, knowing what you offer, having a clear offer, having a clear strategy to get people to buy that offer, and then having a marketing strategy that shows people how you create that, how you help them with that offer. If you don't have that, or it's not working, or it's not quite aligned, or it's sort of outdated. A lot of times people come to me when things are outdated. They've got something and there's just something a little off, something feels off, or something's not working, or what have you. And we just really go under the hood and look at the details of their strategy to figure out where's the problem, just like a mechanic does with your car, right? Hey, we got this noise here. Oh, we don't know why, right? So, okay, let's open up the hood. Let's check the engine. Let's check the lights. Let's check the things, right? I don't know anything about cars. Don't even have a car at the moment. And so if you don't know and you don't have a clear strategy, creating content is always going to feel hard. It's always, anything in your business will always feel like you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And so I just want to set that off right off from the bat, right? If you are changing your strategy, that also might be why content feels hard, because your content now needs to sort of accomplish a slightly different objective, and that is a change. The other thing to share, if you don't know me, is my consulting background, my master's degree. A lot of my training, my corporate work before I came into being a business coach was around helping large organizations change. A lot of consulting and coaching around implementing changes and deciding what changes to make and then how to execute them. And so from a change perspective, right, sometimes the reason something feels hard is that you're not actually giving credit for the fact that you changed something in your strategy, and therefore there's a little domino effect. Again, not everything in your business has to change, right? I'm not saying like it needs to be a big problem, but when we're looking at something and we don't know why it's hard, right, in the content example, a lot of times it's like, well, what? And these are things that your doctor's going to ask you too, right? Oh, you're having this symptom. When did this start? What was going on when this symptom started, right? Same in your business. Understanding, why does this feel hard? Is it just that like, and we'll get to this, but like, so point being, if we don't have a strategy and we don't know why we're doing something, or that we've changed something, by definition, the content strategy has to change. By definition, some other things have to change. And so if you're making yourself wrong or it's hard for you, this might be the reason. And you can just, okay, let yourself off the hook. No big deal. We just made some, changes in the strategy or our approach. And therefore, it feels a little weird to write content because you're right. You're doing, the purpose is now a little different, right? Anytime we make a change, it feels hard, period. That's why I've had a job my whole career, is because change is hard for humans. Side note, I actually really love change, and I'm a person that has created a lot of change in my life. But that's the change that I wanted to create, right? I don't want change to come at me. And I just want change to happen. We all just want change. Even somebody who loves change, like I still just want to control it all, right? And I still just want to go, well, yeah, I changed my business, but I don't want to have to like work hard to make I just want to make the decision to make the shift, and then like magically all the domino effect, everything magically happens. I don't want to do anything, right? Like we all have that, even if you love change. Human brains are not wired to change. They're wired to stay the same because they think that's why we're safe. And so we just have to work with that. So now that we have a strategy and we have a content strategy and we are aware of whether or not we've changed something, then the next piece, and my first, like I actually have, how many things do I have for you? 6 things today if we get to all of them. My number one thing, now that I've set this strategy stage, my number one thing is knowing the purpose of each piece of content, right? So if you're just generically sitting down to write a piece of content because you said you would, because everybody tells you you're supposed to post 17 times a day on Instagram, right? That's not a good enough reason. And your brain is going to call bullshit when you don't feel like it, and it's going to sit down and be like, well, I don't even know what to write, right? Because you don't have a why. Your brain needs a why, your business needs a why, your strategy needs a why, your content plan needs a why, each piece of content needs a why, and that helps so much when it feels hard. And so the why could be, right, like by the way, I'm definitely not a copywriter, but I have 7+ years of writing copy and maybe 4 or 5 years of at a high level, strategic level, helping clients with their copy. And I want to say that I'm definitely not a copywriter. I'm not walking in like jumping into my clients' copy editing. But I am very high touch, and I do review a lot of sales pages behind the scenes. I review a lot of copy behind the scenes. So I'm in it. But if we don't know, so back to what's the purpose? The purpose, just to like go super simple marketing foundations, like, is this to create growth in your audience or reach? That's one kind of piece of content, just to go super simple. Is it to nurture your audience, your existing audience? And then is it for some sort of conversion, right? Are you trying to get them to sign up for something? Are you trying to get them to buy something? Are you trying to get them to take some action? Just oversimplified. In general, you always want to have some combination of all three. And then tweak and adjust that to based on what your business needs at this time, right? To your strategy. There's other ways to look at content, and it doesn't have to, like, there's more to it than that, but I just think that's just a very simple, just to give you an example of like, what do I mean by purpose, right? And so then we also know what we are going to evaluate that content around. So for example, if I'm creating a piece of sales content or conversion content, and I want you to sign up for today's masterclass or mini masterclass, right? Then I'm probably not going to be, it's not going to be fair for me to evaluate, this might be a bad example, but it's not going to be fair for me to evaluate that piece of content on how much reach it gets on LinkedIn or how many likes it gets. Because personally, I just don't care. That's not the point of that content piece, right? I just want you to freaking sign up for this. So my evaluation of that piece of content is, did enough people sign up for this? Right? That's what I care about. And so I'm not going to go for the vanity metrics on that one. But maybe I'm looking to grow my audience on LinkedIn, and I want to put like a hook out there that's kind of like spicy, and I want my people to comment on it because I want the algorithm to take it and show it to new people. Then I'm going to go in and look at likes and engagement, but I'm mostly going to care about reach. I'm going to go look at what Instagram or what LinkedIn is telling me of how many people got to see that and how does that compare to my other content. And then that also helps me know like what to like that gives me some data to know how to tweak and adjust it. But again, if we don't have a purpose, then when content feels hard, one, we maybe don't have anything to say, right? And I know you have stuff to say. Or it feels hard because you're sitting down with, I don't know, it could be this, I don't know, should I write about this and get people to sign up? Or should I write about this because I thought that would be cool and maybe people would, you know, if you just don't have again, it's like when you have 47 ideas and not a decision and a plan, it just makes it so much harder. And I say this as a creative, as a type B, as a person who really prefers to fly by the seat of her pants outside of business, especially. And so we need some examples. And then here's another couple of examples. Like sometimes we want to just create a touch point, which I think would probably fall under nurture, right? But like if you're doing a sales sprint or you've got a launch right now, right? Sometimes the purpose of a piece of content is just, I'm trying to get multiple touch points so that people hear this 87 times so that they buy my thing by the end of the deadline of the launch, right? And so therefore, sometimes the purpose of the content is just touch points. And I'm not a huge quantity over quality, but sometimes quantity is the thing, right? Especially if you're looking at a launch cycle or a launch period, right? And so again, knowing what your purpose is helps you know all those rest of those things. And a lot of times I think, just like in business, when we don't have a clear vision of where we want to take the business, so if you started this year off at some point, we're at March 6th, right? So if you don't have a general idea now of your strategic plan for your business for the year, you're probably feeling a little, right? Like you probably don't have a clear vision for the future of where you want to go. And so it's hard to execute on a non-thought out, on a not clear vision, right? So same here. Okay, let me know if you have questions. I think I've beat the beat the drum of have a strategy to death. But again, I just think that when we have lack of clarity on a piece of the business, if it oftentimes points to a lack of clarity higher up in the overall strategy and vision. Okay, and now I'm going to go super like practical. I have found this is one of the things that has helped me immensely. I have shared it with clients. It doesn't always work for everyone and for everyone's brain. So again, we have to take this and leave it, or maybe this is something to just try out and see if it works for you. If it doesn't, that's like no harm, no foul. But I have found, because writing, and I'm going to use writing, but it could be writing, it could be, creating video, it could be like, this is a piece of content, right? It's a very, very long form piece of content, but it's a piece of content, right? So if we just think about any kind of content creation, yes, it needs to be strategic. I've beat that dead horse enough. And it's also creative, right? It requires that part of your brain that's creative. And it requires a strategic / practical part of your brain when it's like, well, does it have I don't know about you, but I'm very long-winded and I have to make sure I hit the character limit, or I'm going to write a piece of content that's too long and LinkedIn won't take it, right? That's a very practical, that's a very different side of the brain than when I'm like, whoo, what do my ideal clients need to know about today, right? Like those are totally different ways of thinking and totally different sides of the brain. And one thing that I think is a challenge just inherently in creating content is that it needs both your practical strategic brain and your creative side if it's done well. And so when we can separate out the different parts of the content creation process, when we can separate them out, just like time blocking is about doing like tasks together, when we can approach that kind of concept with our content writing, most people, I think, find this to be easier. So for example, in a separate sitting, plan your content. What am I going to talk about? What's the strategic purpose, right? Let's just say you're in a launch. Okay, great. That's usually the easiest because you're like, yeah, I have 3 weeks or 2 weeks to put out the thing. So I want to start with this, I want to end with this, and then I need to plan out something for the middle, right? As an example. But if you're just on a regular month, okay, what's the purpose? And I always ask my clients this first thing. What's the purpose of this month's content? What are we driving people towards, right? Not knowing that, what are we selling, right? Is it the same thing? I'm always selling one-on-one work, but I always do that in a slightly different way. Sometimes my focus, last month we did Real Connections, my networking events had a 2-year anniversary celebration. And so I was really focused on that, right? That was my primary focus besides the fact that I'm always selling client work, but that was my focus in my content. That was my focus around the business. And so just knowing what your focus point, again, back to the strategy, knowing your purpose. But so if I'm planning, then I know, okay, for 2 weeks, I'm going to make sure that I'm talking about Real Connections. And then 2 weeks after that, maybe I'll talk about this mini masterclass or something else, right? Or maybe then I'll just, promote my work, just my one-on-one work straightforwardly for 2 weeks. So knowing your planning, that's kind of one thought process. And so having a separate sitting or a separate time block where you're working on that, I find to be really helpful. It's also, this is a great place to use your coach or a business bestie or someone else as a brainstorm partner to go back and forth around okay, does it make sense to do this first, or does it matter? Thinking that through. 1, planning. 2, then in a separate sitting, do the actual writing. And I highly, highly, highly recommend editing being separate. So for example, when you're writing, or maybe I know a lot of my clients like to use voice notes to themselves. When you're writing, the messiest effing first draft you can do, for me, it's always super long. My first draft is 2 to 3 times the length of what I actually put out because I just need to go messy, blah, and say stuff in really long ways. And then I'll come back and make it sound good and make it concise and put it in the right order and realize that I'm telling 2 stories in this piece of content, and so now they become 2 separate pieces of content. So the messier you can get, first off, it keeps your brain back to that concept of the practical versus the creative. It keeps your brain in that creative space. And you're just much better off if you vomit, word vomit, however you, if you're recording videos, like, you know, really letting yourself have 87 first, not 87, but like 3 first drafts, right, of how you do that, depending on if you edit or not, but like really giving yourself the essence of a first draft, whatever that is in the content that you're creating. Same, like I'm gonna be doing a longer masterclass end of this month, maybe in April. I haven't decided the timeline yet. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing in advance of that, after, like, I have it outlined, but I'm going to start I'm practicing my delivery around that to see how long it is, right? That's the concept of a messy first draft, right? Of like, let me just see how and as I'm saying this, this is kind of a tangent. You know what? This isn't helpful. Let me take that off, right? So planning as a separate sitting, writing as a separate sitting, super messy first draft. And then therefore that means editing as a separate sitting. So it's really, really great, I find, to write a messy first draft and to like get up and walk away. And if you need a timer, put a timer on it. Because I don't know about you, I'll go into another planet. You have a client call, you must get into Client Planet. But then coming back with fresh eyes, and if you can hire an editor, this is a great space for someone else's brain to come in when you're ready for it. But like having yourself, then you put on your editor hat, right? I'm always big on like, what hat are you wearing in your business right now? And this is a great example. Like I'm just now the editor because the CEO and the content planner already planned out the content and the purpose of this content. So I know what the CEO was planning. Hang on, I'm just going to let one more person in. Right, so I know what the CEO had planned. I have my strategic plan for the content. I already see that the writer sat down and wrote a messy draft, and now I'm coming in with my editor hat to just make it sound good, make sure it's not too long, make sure it hits all the points, make sure it's got the right link, you know, all that stuff, right? Again, very different part of the brain, a lot less a lot less creative, and a lot more like practical in that respect, right? And then maybe you're like a little bit going back to being the writer of like, does this tell the story we're trying to tell, right? Or back to the CEO had a little bit of like, does this strategically get the point across? The key message we were trying to get across, right? And then if you don't have an assistant or a VA or an OBM or somebody that does the posting for you, I highly recommend doing that in a separate sitting too, and batching that stuff. Because that's also a different type of task. And it's just helpful for your brain. So when content writing feels hard, when work feels hard, like organizing the work in your schedule, one of the least sexy and most important things that I do with my clients is we plan. Sometimes we are down to the detail of like planning out what's getting done this week, because it's just so much easier when you organize it in a way that works for your brain. And that is a practice and a process, and that takes time, and it's different for everyone to iterate on. But I just find that works so much better for most people. When your brain is already in the editing mode, it can just edit more things. When your brain is already in the writing mode, it can just keep writing more things. When you're already in the planning mode, you can just keep going, right? Versus like, let me post this piece and then let me get really creative 5 minutes later and come up with like the best thing I've ever said. Like, it's just, right? Like, you're laughing, like it's just not fair to ourselves, but then we sort of like weirdly expect ourselves to be able to do that, right? Like, go look up the number, I forget what the data is, but it's like when we change tasks, look up task switching. When we switch tasks, you basically, your brain, like, it's like you lose IQ points. Your brain slows down and has to speed back up. Like you get a little dumber there for 5-10 minutes, and as you sort of get smart, quote unquote, I'm butchering this, but look it up. But then you kind of shift back in. But it takes 5-10 minutes. I forget how long. 30 minutes. I don't remember. It's not 30 seconds like we think it is, right? And so when you can just keep your brain focused on the thing that's at hand and grouping like tasks, we can do that same thing in any part of our business, but it's really, really helpful in content. And then my other very practical is get up and walk. Like, I'm going to tell you two things and sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I think holding duality is important, and doing both of these things is really important. Number one, have a time block on your calendar where you do it, where you write, where you create content, where you can commit to yourself that you're going to do it. I think it's the thing that we just all want to be like, I'm going to come up with some reason why I don't have to, right? And again, if that's in your business strategy right now, then you don't have to, but it doesn't matter what the thing is. There's always something we don't want to do. So have it organized, have it planned when you do it, and sit down and do it when you say you're going to do it. Commit to that to yourself. And when you need to, get up and take a walk, get up and take a shower, get up and walk away. One of the things that you will find if you do set up your writing time or your content creation time all together, you will find that sweet spot for you. For some people, it's 30 minutes. If they write for more than 30 minutes, they start to their brain just is done, right? Or they start to get a little, like for me, if I write for too long, I get a little ADHD in my brain, and I just kind of can't. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, right? Time to close it and come back, right? And so know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, right? Like commit to the agreement and adjust that time frame. You'll find your sweet spot. And then also know when to walk away when it doesn't. It's not about when it doesn't feel right and when you haven't tried, right? We don't want to try. We don't want to start. But it's about when you are in it and the brain's not working. That's very different. And one of the we all know this. When you take a walk, when you get up, sometimes if I'm doing dishes, if I'm in the shower, that's where I'll be like, that's the thing I wanted to say. That was the end of that post, right? Your brain will still keep working on it in the background, actually, like whether you're actively doing it or not. I love this idea, by the way. I learned this when I was a hypnotherapist. You can ask yourself a question. It's much better to ask yourself a question than to like create a statement of like, I need to finish this post, or I need to figure out how to end this post, right? It's like, well, what's the best way to end this post? And then just ask that question and then close your brain, go off and do something else. Your brain will noodle on it. It will come, and it might come in the shower. It might come in a walk. It might come when you first wake up. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, that's the answer. And I'll like quickly put it on my phone and go back to sleep, right? The subconscious mind will answer your questions. And so again, commit to yourself to sit down and write and give yourself the time to do the task and not ask yourself to be magical. And I say magical in a like unrealistic way. I very much believe in the magic of life. And know when to walk away, know when to take a break, know when to let it be and come back. And then my other piece that kind of goes along with this is number 3, is stop waiting until you feel inspired. Oh my God, put out a piece of content that's crappy. Like, seriously. And I say that, what's the, William Faulkner said something like, I only write when I'm inspired. Good thing I'm inspired at 9 a.m. every morning. Like, because he fucking sat down at 9 a.m. every morning and to write, right? And sometimes when you do that, right, writer's block is a thing, right? Every writer, go look at all the famous writers. None of them said like, oh, every time I ever sat down to write, it just flowed out of me. Like, yes, there's moments like that. And there's moments where it's the exact opposite of that. And there's everything in between. That's the reality. And so expecting yourself to always be inspired and to always be in that good creative space is just unrealistic. And that's why sometimes business doesn't feel sustainable. If you're expecting yourself to be in that super magical, dialed up, best version of yourself moment all the time in order to be able to create content, in order to be able to sell your work, in order to be able to get on a client call, right? It's just completely unrealistic. We have to be humans and be normal. And that's why I'm so big on creating a business that's sustainable for you to execute so that you can do the work that your business needs you to do, even on your harder days. Not to say that you can't take vacation and have sick days and things, but that's what's gotten me through my hard days. And some hard days, I'm like, please give me a client so that I can just do my work. And that will actually oftentimes get me, one, out of my head of my personal life or whatever I don't want to do that day or whatever's bothering me that day. But when you create a business around the work that brings you joy, then actually a lot of times I'll be like, like, yes, I was serving a client, but there's something therapeutic that happens behind the scenes for you when you are of service in the way that you need to be. And so back to writing content or creating content when it feels uninspired. Like if you're waiting for that magic expectation of yourself, right? If you're a perfectionist in any way, that's probably what's in the way. That's probably the thing that makes it feel hard. Versus, yeah, just some days you sit down to do it and you don't want to. And I'm just going to go, yeah, that sucks. I don't want to, but I'm going to do it anyway. Like just like we do like eating vegetables or taking walks or whatever is good for our bodies, right? Whatever good habits we've created, right? I don't know how many, please, if you haven't read Atomic Habits by James Clear, I think I read that like 5 times a year and I apply different concepts for different clients. It's just such a great, like I can just pick it up, read one page and go, oh yeah. Oh yeah, I can apply that little thing here. But when we start habits, back to the concept of when things change in your business and we don't recognize that something's changing or we're not giving credit for the fact that it's changed. And then we're like, but why is this thing so hard over here? It might be because something changed. Same. Starting a new habit, it just sucks sometimes, you guys. Like it just does. Okay, it doesn't mean we don't have to do it. And it doesn't mean we have to wait to feel ready to do it or like, right back to being inspired. You don't have to be inspired to sit down and write good content. But when you get in that habit, one, the habit feels easier over time. It sucks to start. And a lot of times I'll sit down to write content and be like, oh, this is going to be one of those bad days. And it's not always. I'm not always right because even when I'm in a good habit and I'm doing it on a regular basis and I'm in the flow and I'm having a decent day, like I don't know how it's going to be till I sit down and start and see if it's going to be easy or hard that day, right? And so again, we were talking so much today about like the macro hard when it feels hard, but there's always going to be those micro hards where it sucks on a certain day and it just doesn't mean we're not going to do it. And there's that difference between being a perfectionist and pushing yourself and having too high of an expectation and cutting yourself a break and like just putting out a piece of content that's a B-. I know that's like, I know some of you are cringing right now. Like the perfectionists are like, oh, blasphemy, right? But sometimes done is better than perfect. And I'm all about refinement and mastery, but sometimes done is better than perfect. And those messy drafts, right? Letting yourself have a messy first draft, letting yourself sit down and write a crappy piece of content is how you create great content in the future. It is a practice. Nobody I know, even my writers, nobody I know like started their business and was like, okay, here comes the best piece of content ever. And I was never bad, right? Like it just doesn't work that way. My best pieces of content are because I also wrote and agonized over and put out shitty content, right? What is the like success is about? Success is about how much you also fail. Like how many failures will you have to create the biggest success? I'm totally butchering that, but you know that quote that I'm talking about. Same. Okay, I'm going to check the comments. What questions do you have? And I'll do a quick recap for those of you who just joined, and then we will go to the last few for the last few minutes here. Hi, just finishing lunch, not on cam. Yeah, of course. Be on cam, off cam, whatever you want. Okay, so just a quick recap. Having a strategy, a strategy in your business, high level, a content strategy underneath that, and then therefore each piece of content has a purpose. If you don't have the why, if you don't have the purpose, it's gonna feel really hard, right? So that was number one. Number two, we talked about very, very practical, separating your tasks in different boxes so that you can sort of keep that practical brain separate from your creative brain and really utilize both of those in the right moment. Having good habits, all that stuff. Number three was stop waiting to feel inspired. Do it messy. And I also want to say, like, please don't apply do it messy to everything. But do it messy is often how we get started, how we get back into the habit. Oh, there was a question about getting back into the habit. Let me just read that really quick. Somebody had submitted in advance. By the way, when you sign up for these, anytime you want, you can put a where is it? You can put a question in the sign up form if you have a specific question, and that's a really great way. By the way, if you're not able to join live, that's a really great way to get your question answered when you catch the replay. Okay, let me just quickly find this really fast because I had it up and then I had to restart my computer. But I want to answer that question. Here we go. It didn't paste. Oh, that's annoying. Okay, I can't find the actual question, but I know what it was. It was basically about getting things back going when you like stop, right? Or worrying about not being able to stop because what if the algorithm doesn't show your, right? The algorithm favors your consistency and all of that stuff. So I have a couple of thoughts to that. One is just like anything, right? I think that habit piece is part of the answer, which is sometimes we just have to get back on the horse, right? Like sometimes it just takes a minute. And again, like go ask a writer like how they feel about it. And they will like, just to like give yourself some slack, like, because a lot of people say, I'm not a good writer. I'm not good at creating content. I'm not a marketer. Fine. You only need to be as good of a writer, marketer, videographer person to run a successful business. You don't have to do it and then like be the expert in that, right? But even the people who are experts in that, they have their days. And so I just want to like remind you of that and remind you that they also have to adjust their habits and they also have to make themselves do it sometimes. And that sometimes that just getting started is the hardest part. And so just looking at it from that perspective of like, this will get easier. And actually the way a lot of times to make it easier, I think this is like one of the things in business that nobody wants to hear, but it's just the truth. Like sometimes the way to make things easier is to just fucking do it 10 times or 20,000 times. Like that repetition not only builds the skill, but it makes it, right? Think about like athletes, right? When you're, I was total tangent side note. I was obsessed with Michael Jordan when I was a kid. Obsessed. I grew up in North Carolina. I like know everything. I know everything about him and the teams, and I know all the stuff. Turns out later we found other things out about him. He's not a perfect human, but he is a master on the court. And I just have such an appreciation for the sport of basketball. Anyway, point being, right? He didn't just like wake up Michael Jordan, like get born Michael Jordan and like start dunking, right? Like he had to practice. How many foul shots do you think he shot in his life? Not in a game, right? Like millions and probably billions. Like I don't even know, right? But was it easy in the beginning? No. Did he probably have to adjust his style and like how he shoots over the years? Probably, right? Like did he have did he have to make an adjustment when he had an injury, right? When he was in the off season and he started back up at the beginning of every season, did he shoot his exact perfect free throw percentage shooting, stat at the beginning? No, right? But somehow we like expect ourselves to just magically be good at this because I don't know why. So point being, when we start the habit and we repeat the habit, that creates more ease. It creates more because it creates more familiarity. It creates more ease because you get better at it. And it creates more ease and it creates more confidence because it's not so awkward and wonky. And so it could just be that simple of like, sometimes I get off the horse and I just get back on and it's going to suck in the beginning. And that's okay. Like some of it is just that simple from a strategic standpoint. If there's mindset stuff coming up there, that's a totally different, like more one-on-one conversation. But I think that's just important to sort of see like, where's the problem to solve? The other thing that I would say is from the beginning, know the purpose of your pieces of content, know the purpose of your like content strategy, because maybe you don't care about the algorithm right now, and maybe you do. And I think versus like everybody says you're supposed to care about the algorithm, and everybody says to do this. It's like, well, does that actually fit your business and what it needs right now, right? And so that's a strategic question that only you can answer. But I think knowing the answer of whether that's true or whether it's just a should is super, super important. And also, with that said, I also think this is a fairly blanket statement for small businesses, that the algorithm is always going to change. It will never stay the same. And jumping quickly every time it changes is kind of like being a day trader with the stock market, right? Like if you're good at that, great, right? And if you're a social media expert, great. But if you're not, then maybe take like a quarterly look at your investments, right? Or when something goes really crazy, you might want to, this is a terrible concept to be bringing up right now, but I think like the concept is knowing like how much it affects you and how much you need to react versus just having content out there. Like for me, I'm mostly using social media for nurture. And so not always, but like that's the number one thing. And so I kind of don't care if I get like my best reach all the time. I'm just trying to make sure that the people in my world keep seeing me on a regular basis. It's about touch points and ongoing. Do you understand what my thought leadership is? Do you, right? That's just me and that's my business right now. But if I'm then deciding in a different season that I want to really, really grow my reach, then yeah, it matters. But then I'm just going to put more energy into that and less energy into something else. And so I hope that helps answer the question. Like, I think that's as generic as I can without like diving straight into your business. But I think those are a lot of times the shoulds and the like, does this matter? Okay, I want to quickly let me know if there's any more questions. I want to quickly get to my last three, which are a lot easier. If you're just like, I don't know what to write about. I just don't know what to write about, right? Like, I want to challenge you on that. You have a lot to say. You have a lot to say. So my number one suggestion kind of goes back to like separate sittings of planning and stuff. Whenever you have an idea, please have just a running list. I have the messiest running list ever, stuff that I will never actually filter through, but I can search on stuff, right? Oh yeah, I wanted to say something about like content feels hard, then I'll start searching for that. And somewhere in there, I can find a nugget that I wrote one day about this content. Or about this topic, excuse me. So if you don't have a running list of content ideas, that's great, because when you're not in a planning mode and you just need to put something out because you told yourself you would and you were gonna get into the habit, right? That's a great way to just get something out. Oh yeah, I already did the planning. Great, thank you, past me, for doing the planning. Let me go grab that content piece, right? That doesn't fit necessarily all the time with your content strategy, but sometimes there's just value in that. Or let that help you create your content strategy. Or create your content strategy, then have a list within that content strategy, better yet, of what topics you need to talk about to satisfy that. And then you'll have your topics. And then when you sit down to write, you already have your topics. Oh, I don't need to decide what to write today. I'm just here to sit down and write this piece. Today, my job is to write this piece to promote Think Differently and tell people to come to the March 6th Think Differently, where we're talking about content writing is hard. Okay, that's all I had to do that day when I was sitting down to write content, because I had already decided the other stuff before, right? Even if it was earlier that day, I had already decided, separate sitting, separate brain, separate hat on my head in the business, and that just makes it easier. But a couple of other things, if you're some people find out in this is that you're more of a responder. Human design has a better way to say this, and I can't remember what it is, but one thing that I often recommend, and this is not for everybody, if you have comparisonitis or you are likely to go into doom scrolling and to like fall off the planet, this is not for you. But if you're trying to figure out what to say, go online, read some content. You probably have a different opinion than someone else whose content you're reading. What is your thought? That's a really great way to kind of get into like, what's your thought leadership, right? We could do a whole Think Differently on like how to set yourself apart and really, get your hot takes and like get your thought leadership identified. But I think sometimes like reacting to someone else's, now please, I'm not saying go in and comment on their stuff and tell them they're wrong. It's not that. But we all have different takes on different concepts, right? Or maybe somebody's writing about a concept and they're talking about it, in this way. And you're like, yeah, but you know what I do is I like this concept because I can talk about it over here from this perspective, right? So using what's already out there and responding to it can oftentimes help us. It's like one of those, like, sometimes you don't have clarity on something, but you know what you don't want. I don't know what I want. I don't know how to solve this, but I know how I don't want to feel, or I know that I don't want to do that, right? I really want to paint this room, and I do not know what color I want. But I can tell you it's not going to be white, and I can tell you it's not going to be black, and I can tell you it's not going to be gray, right? It at least is the start to the process, right? I probably should take my own advice and like write a list of colors I don't want, and like what colors are left, right? So giving yourself something to respond to also helps you sort of go, oh yeah, I do have something to say about that topic, but my slant is different because I'm different and I have a different offer and I have a different audience and I have a different take and I have a different background and I have a different perspective and this is my hot take, blah, 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 right? It's also great for like, this is a weird backwards way to do it, but like take AI, have ChatGPT spit something out super generically, get mad at it. Like anything you're mad at is a great piece of content. Don't like put it out there, final editor, as mad and angry, but like that's a great thing. Like if you're fired up about it, somebody else will be too. It's something that your audience needs to hear from you. But like I will read something online or I'll like get something that ChatGPT spits back out. I'm like, this is so generic. Like where is okay, now I know what I'm saying, right? Like it gives you something to respond back to. So find like something, right? Like whatever that is, if you can find something that works for you to respond to, I can find that to be really helpful. And then my other piece around just responding, this is kind of responding, it's kind of different, but when you don't know what to say, write to a specific person. Everybody talks about client avatars and ideal clients, and that is great and valuable and blah. But in this moment, what I'm saying is like, write to a specific person, right? So that sales call that you got off of, that was a great client. They would be a really great client to work with and they're not ready to work with you. Awesome. What do they need to hear from you? Or what does someone just like them? If you want 3 more of those sales calls of people that are ready to work with you, like what's the before? What do they need to hear from you about their topic? What did they bring? Why are they here? Why are they thinking about working with you? What did they have to say? And then can you, in my example, like I would be like, could I just coach them on that topic, right? Like how could I generically coach them in an email? And then write to them. That's your content, right? And you can do that with everything. Like every time I always tell clients, like get off of client calls, or at the end of the day, revisit your client calls and what themes popped up. Now you've got content for days. You have stuff to say. You just forget that you have stuff to say when we have those moments. And again, please keep a running list because you will not always have something to say. You will not always have a great content idea, and that's what your list is for. Oh, questions. So this is a great one. The last time somebody asked you a question, please tell me that you wrote it down and added it to your content list, right? So people ask me questions here all the time. I create topic ideas for Think Different. This is like, I talk about this all the time using your work for market research. These events, I could talk all day about like how effective these events are for my business. They help create conversions. They also help me write content because I could take anything that I said today, one little tip, right? And like, it's now a piece of content that I could write up and put together in a different form or record a short video with one content piece here. But also you all ask questions, right? I'm engaging my audience. I know what you need. I know what you want to hear about this topic. And then I can now put more content out around this. Or if I have a topic that I'm interested in and nobody asks any questions and nobody thinks it's interesting, then that helps me know that's not something that you care about. And your content is for your people. It's not for you. I often record my client calls or sales calls so I can go back, and see what I said and how they reacted 100%. And using their words, right? Like we always want to use like practitioner speak or whatever your expertise is. Like we always want to think about it from the perspective of the practitioner. But if this is for your audience, like what words are they using? And then I already said this, but maybe your expectations are too high. Number 5, maybe your expectations are too high. So we talked a lot about like, it's hard to write content and so you don't, or it's hard to write content and so you're sort of trying to make yourself do it. But I think a lot of times that's not the only thing that makes content feel hard. And so in this example, I think sometimes content feels hard because we've just set an unrealistic expectation. And this is the case for really anything in business, right? Like if you expect yourself to serve 100 one-on-one clients, like you will always, that's just never a good idea, right? And so I think if your expectation is too high, like again, maybe you're spending hours in the editing phase and not letting yourself actually post it and publish it. There's some mindset stuff going on there too, right? But I think like if you're expecting perfection or expecting too many, like if you say, I have to post every day, and then you can't actually execute on that because you don't have time and brain space, then change your expectations of yourself, change your content plan, and maybe try twice a week or 3 times a week or once a week, whatever it is for you, right? Maybe your expectations are too high, and so you're just always failing because you're just expecting yourself to like, accomplish your New Year's resolutions by the end of January. And so maybe we need to downgrade to like normal, realistic expectations. And again, going back to the very first thing, does that then line back up with your strategy, right? Because if your strategy requires you to execute and serve 100 clients and post every single day and do all these things, like it is not a sustainable strategy. It's not a sustainable plan. I would love to talk to you to make that more sustainable. That's exactly the work I do with my clients. But if we're in perfectionist mode, or if we're in high achiever mode, or if we just have expectations that are shoulds because people said post every day, we have to like translate that and like let it filter in, like the coffee filters do down the thing to the coffee pot. Like, does it make sense for you? Does it make sense for your business? Does it align to your strategy? Does it make sense in your content strategy? Do you have enough time to execute on that, right? Then you get to decide if that is actually what works for you. And so while maybe we need to like give ourselves less of a hard time so that we can get out there and put more out and write more and create more, it can also be the opposite. Maybe you're just trying to create too much, and that might be why it's not working, because you're just like, well, I had to quickly throw something out, so I just constantly put out shitty posts, right? Again, the opposite can be true that we talked about before. And so just finding your balance there is important, knowing what edge you're working. And then finally, mindset is always in there. So I hope that something in there triggered you to say, oh, that feels crunchy. I don't like that. Like maybe there's something there that you can go play with. Okay. I will stay for a couple more minutes for those of you who are live, but let me just quickly wrap this up. I appreciate you being here. What I forgot to tell you is that when you join me live, I'm entering you into a giveaway at the end of every month. Everybody who joined for these events, I throw your names in a hat. Theoretically, I use Google, but we do a random drawing so that you will win a free mini coaching session. So because you're here and you're live, you've already been entered to win. If you come back in 2 weeks, you'll be entered to win again, and then I'll do the drawing at the end of the month. And if you're looking for a coach, if you're looking for some support in any of the things that we talked about today, especially around your strategy and your offers, that's one of the things that I really, really love to help people with. And that will always translate down into how to make content easier, because when you know where you're going and you know how you're getting there, you already it starts to create that content plan for you. And I can help you with a content plan too. So reach out. I've got the links in the chat, and the links will also be underneath the replay. If you're interested, just hop on a free call with me and we can start exploring what it might look to work together. I have spots open this month, but I also book spots out in advance. And so if you're looking for like a May start date, I'm booking out as far as May right now. So you don't have to be, ready to put the money down today to get started today. You can also put a deposit down for a future start date. And I'm doing more and more of that these days. People will say, okay, I'm going to be ready in a month or two. And then great, we'll just book you into the future spot. But I do only have 1 or 2 spots per month available generally. So if you're interested, let's talk. And if you're on the replay or if you're live and you want to ask another question, hang out. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Oh, next time we're talking about the myth that you've been sold about your money mindset and what actually works instead. And that one I created out of something that made me mad. right? So I actually took my own advice here, and I'm just so tired of seeing this story online. I think it's incredibly damaging, incredibly harmful, and incredibly wrong. And I think it comes from a really, really good place. And I think it's just a misunderstood myth out there, and it makes me so mad. And so we're going to be talking about money mindset, my hot take, my thought leadership around money mindset next week. In 2 weeks. So I'll see you then for that.
Recording stopped.